Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to start now. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hazbiela Ahmed, and I am the Nigerian country representative for the Learning Collaborative and also the local convener from Midspace. You're welcome to the first series of the Learning Collaborative webinar training. First off, let me start with a brief of the Learning Collaborative Community of Practice. So we started the Community of Practice earlier this year. We've had a few meetings already where we had the launch. We also had the formative research presentation, and we had the official launch, and we have several other activities that have taken place. For this webinar series this afternoon, it will be led by Ben. Just a brief on Ben. Ben has worked with various NGOs NGOs and international organizations, including UNICEF, WHO, ILO, and has also collaborated with several universities, including Stanford and Columbia. He also has research work and has also contributed vastly into increasing the understanding of how gender norms affect people's health and how their effects can also be measured. Some of his articles and his work can be seen on the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine website. Also on the call are my colleagues, Meredith and Rebecca from the University of San Diego. So Ben, if you're ready, I think we're also ready. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And hi, everyone. I am very happy to see you today. So what we are going to do today is we are going to start with an introduction of social norms and why they are important to be taken into account when we work. Well, I would say not just on health related practices, but in general on any practice of interest in international development, from women empowerment to child marriage, to use of contraceptive, to access to labor, access to female access to labor, etc., etc. This session is divided in two pieces. There's kind of a group chat in the middle, and you will see I try to plan it so that it's very participatory, and you will be invited to give to contribute to the conversation. I'd be very happy if, since there is many of us and only so much time to participate, I will try and invite people who speak first to try and leave space to others after them, so we don't always hear the same voices, if that's possible. I will take my camera off just to make sure that your internet is not slowed down by my camera. But it was very nice showing you my face. Okay, great. Okay, so the attention that is currently given to social norms theory really started with an unresolved mystery that was tackled at the beginning of the early 2000s. And the question was, why did parents practice female genital mutilation or cutting in Senegal? This is really, from this innocent question, really started the whole interest on social norms. And this question was asked by UNICEF at the beginning of the millennia, and it really lasted 10 years to generate the evidence necessary to come up with an answer to this question. In a way, all the parents that were interviewed, they loved their daughters. So they were not cutting their daughters because they hated them, right? All these parents knew, some of them knew, that it wasn't a religious obligation. So some of them thought the Quran said that girls need to be cut, which is not true. We know this is not true. But others knew that no, that there wasn't a religious obligation to do it. Many also knew that it was dangerous for their daughters. So they were observing little girls having hemorrhages, and also older women who had undergone female genital cutting as girls having several problems to their reproductive system. And some parents were, we asked them this, they even said, you know, if I could choose, I would rather not want to. So this is the mystery that we will try to unresolve. So why were these parents doing it then? You know, they love their daughters, it wasn't a religious obligation. So this is where we start, and you will see, I'll give you an answer to this question before we end the session today. So in a way, this question was coming at the right time in international development, after a time in which we had created an assumption in several projects in which we thought that just give people new knowledge and they will change their behavior. Some people said, okay, well, we need to we need to take into account the money problem. But if people have the money, let's just give them money, let's just give them knowledge, and they will get new practices. And if you have read the great book by Nobel Prizes, Esther Duflo and her colleague, who wrote the book Poor Economics, they found exactly that this assumption was wrong. They gave money to people to buy good food. They told people that the food they needed was rice, but these people used the money to actually buy crap food, junk food. So maybe this assumption that you just give people knowledge and they will do the right thing is wrong somehow. And here's an example. This is a study that was conducted after an intervention in Bolivia. Bolivia is obviously a place, it's in South America, very hot, similar to Nigeria, high temperatures. These are the type of villages that you find in Bolivia. So very close by, everyone is living next to each other. And this intervention had found a way to clean up water, to create safe water that could be drunk safely. And the intervention was very simple. It essentially just told people, look, you just need to put your dirty water on top of the roof of your house. And after 8 hours, in a plastic bottle, after 8 hours, the sun will clean up the water and it's safe to drink. And they did a huge campaign, right? Everyone had the new knowledge. They had the means because it was very cheap, but only few people did it. So this is their evaluation. Despite an extensive promotion campaign, we only found moderate compliance with the intervention. So I wonder if any of you has an idea of why did people in Bolivia not do this? What was the issue? So let's open the floor for a second. Let's see if there is one or two people who want to try and explain to me why people did not put their bottles on top of the roofs. And you can write, or you can unmute yourself and talk, or you can write in the chat. Or you can also raise your hands if you know how to do that on Zoom. I see Adam, Adenike, Awalu. I think if any of them, I wonder if any of them has an idea. Dr. Imam Abubakar, Emma, Funke. Yes, please, Awalu. Have a go.
Yeah, hi everyone. I think probably I would like to relate that to the fear of unknown, especially when one has to change to certain things that he's not familiar with. I would want to assume that could be a reason.
That's a very good point. Maybe they were not familiar with this. Maybe they were distrustful. I think that might have played a role. It's not quite what I'm going to say in a second, but yeah, thank you. That's a very intelligent contribution. Let's take another one. Let's see if there is anyone. Please, Comrade Ali Jalaluddin. I hope I pronounced your name right.
Yes, thank you. Probably because of the difficulty in ensuring that they get the bottle of water on top of the roof every time. That could be really stressful, and then a difficult task to getting a bottle of water to the roof.
Thank you very much. Yes, that could be an option. It's very stressful to put the bottle on top of the roof and take it down all the time. It's a lot of work. Thank you. Let's take these other two comments and then we'll move to another explanation. Dr. Hamad Tijani Abibu?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I thought it could be due to the it's not their first need. We just give them what we feel they need, but probably the people in Colombia, they have a need that was not addressed, so that's why they do not adopt this beautiful practice.
Thank you. That's also very, as everyone else, as all the others, this is also a clever remark. Maybe they didn't need this. Very good point. Let's take a last point from Amal Oladimeji.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Probably they've not seen the need, like the previous speaker said, and their risk perception is also low.
A risk perception, very good, yes, very good point. And I see that there is a Daval Kotari. I'll just take Daval's and then we'll move on. Yeah, Daval, please.
Again, thanks. Was it because they thought the other people did not expect them to do that?
Thank you. So all your remarks are very clever. Daval actually got to the explanation. Thank you, Daval, to the explanation that I was going to. So people were very ashamed of putting the bottle on top of the roof. And why is that? So these are very poor communities. Nobody wanted to show that they couldn't afford buying water from the shop. So what they found in the evaluation is that either almost everyone did this, because, you know, after the first person does it, the second person does it, then after a while, it's okay to do it. But nobody wanted to be the first. And so if nobody wants to do the first, then nobody does it, right? So as Daval has remarked in his comment, no, people didn't want to be the poorest of the community. If I am the only one who puts this bottle on the roof, well, then what will people think of me? They will think I'm the one who's poorest and who doesn't have the money to even buy a bottle of water. So I wonder if I would like to take one or two comments. Have you ever experienced, witnessed, or heard of interventions that failed for similar reasons? Oops. And once again, feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand.
This is Sangeeta here. Can I come in?
Please.
So this is an experience from India where we promoted vegetable gardens in households, poor households, hoping that the diet diversity would improve and there would be sort of a decline in undernutrition and stunting rates. We didn't quite see that because people grew the vegetables and sold it in the markets. And the money that came in did not go towards diverse diets. Over.
Thank you, Sangeeta. Very good example. Thank you. Let's see if there's another example.
Can I have? This is Hadiza.
Please go, Hadiza.
Okay. Yeah. So I think this can be explained by family planning, when family planning first came to Nigeria, because they came with issue of either planning your family or stopping having children. And because part of our norm is that, we should not, we have no right to plan our family, or we have no right to stop having children, or only God can really do that. So they now had to change to child spacing. And that's why now we don't actually say family planning, we say child spacing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Hadiza. Thank you. And let's take a last comment from Dr. Imam Abubakar.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Dr. Imam from the Teaching Hospital. I want to set an example to communities. regarding the use of primary healthcare facilities in Nigeria, specifically in the Federal Capital Territory. There is one community that contributed and built their own primary healthcare facility, which is just around Hut, while the other had a political figure who just went to the community and built a gigantic structure that without any community participation from them. So these people that had a small hut always line up to access care, while these that have a very large health facility don't attend the health facility. So this shows that the community really need to be involved and have such community participation for them to take ownership and utilize those structures. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I had a little bit of a hard time to hear, but I think I got the gist of your comment. Okay, so so what are social norms, and how can social norms theory help us plan interventions that don't fail or don't fulfill their full potential as the ones that we mentioned? So first of all, there are many theories of social norms, but what we try to do at the London School is to kind of collapse them and say, here's the 5 things that you really need to know. But I want to say this because if you go around and start reading articles on social norms, or you start talking to people about social norms, don't be surprised if people say, oh, well, I've heard this language, I heard that language. So many languages exist, but really they kind of end up being very similar in their content. And in a way, after many years of work, this is the best diagram that I could produce after 20 years of studying social norms, right? That's the most intuitive one. Here's a little chicken who lives in a flock of, I don't know if you call it flock or herd or whatever, of flamingos. And the chicken wants to know, he's not quite he's not a flamingo, but he wants to pretend that he is one. So really, this is the theory of social norms. We have all these rules about what is normal. And if you're a chicken in a herd of flamingos, well, the rule is you stand up, what is it? 1 meter from the ground. So find your own way, but comply with the rule of the group. So we will get to a more academic definition in a second. So the 3 really important things about, okay. Really, the 3 important things about social norms are: 1, that they are rules, unwritten rules, very often unwritten rules about what's acceptable, right? So for instance, is it acceptable to shake hands or not shake hands? Well, in certain communities, when a man and a woman meet, it's acceptable to shake hands. In other communities, it's not acceptable. So every group has their rules. Examples are when you go away from Nigeria, maybe you go to, I don't know, the United States or to Senegal or to South Africa, and you come back, your friends expect a gift. So that's kind of the unwritten rule. Or if you have a visitor coming at your place, maybe you offer them water, or if you're eating, you invite them to eat with you, or you leave a tip to the waiter. In the United States, this is very important. And they're often maintained by positive and negative social sanctions. And we will see in a second what we mean by social sanctions. So knowing the rules of the game is actually very important. We know that it's beneficial because if you know the norms of a group, well, then you know how to play and you're less stressed, right? So if you go somewhere, if you go into when you go into a new job, your blood pressure is a bit higher because you don't know, how do they expect me to dress? How do they expect me to speak? What time do I need to come in? But as you start to know the rules, your blood pressure goes down. Okay, I know the rules of the game now. And also being accepted in a group is correlated with physical and mental health. But complying with social norms can also result in harm. So here in the first picture, we have what happens to a foot when you wear high heels. So if there is an unwritten rule that as a woman, you're supposed to wear high heels at a business meeting maybe, or at a wedding, well, that's bad for you. And in the last one, these are corsets that were used in Europe in the 1800s. This was supposed to be beauty, a standard of beauty, but it really destroyed all the internal organs of women who wore them. And these 2 examples are from Europe. I often use examples from sub-Saharan Africa, but I always mix them with examples from Europe to say harmful norms exist everywhere in the world, right? There is no single place where you have more norms. And the man at the center, we will get to the end. Why why is because of a norm that he doesn't have the left hand. And we will see this in a few slides. But just to say, even though norms have positive effect, we today focus on the harmful effects. So as I said, there are many, many theories, but here the one that is the most used in international development and global health. And is a theory developed by Cialdini and his colleagues, but essentially the theory says there are two types of social norms. Well, actually, first of all, social norms are beliefs. It's a theory emerging from social psychology obviously in the mind, and social, your mind about what happens around you. So social norms are the belief that you yourself have about one, what other people in your group do. So you see this little man, well, this little figure is thinking about what others in the group do. And that person is thinking most people do the red behavior, whatever it is. So that's the first type. So if I want to get on the train, I will try to think, okay, when are most people getting on the train? And I try to get on the train when there are least people. And then the second type of belief is what you yourself believe other people approve of and disapprove of. So if you have a business meeting, you think, okay, will they approve of me if I go wearing my swimming trunks? And you know they won't. So maybe you put your best t-shirt, your best shirt, and a tie, if you're a man. So just to look a little bit about the first type of belief, right? Is really the idea that we are all sheep in a way, that we tend all to close ourselves in group where we all do the same things. And just to show, this is an experiment that was carried out in the 90s. I don't know if anyone knows about this experiment, but what they did is the researchers put people looking at the sky, 4 people, and then everyone stopped looking at the sky. And after a while, there were so many people looking at the sky because they thought, oh, if they look at the sky, there must be something interesting. I want to see that too. Well, there were so many people looking at the sky that in a while, they had to call the police because they were stopping traffic. And here's a little video. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's really funny. I want to show it to you.
To answer that question, we set up a hidden camera experiment to see if this woman would stand up at the sound of this tone, simply because everyone else is. You might be thinking you'd never go along with this. Or would you?
So what they're doing here is this woman in pink.
Just 3 beats, and without knowing why she's doing it, is now conforming perfectly to the group.
So you see at every beep, they have all the actors stand up, and then she started standing up. She doesn't know why, but hey, if everyone does it, I want to do it too. And then they removed all the actors.
Okay, now she's alone. The crowd is gone and nobody is watching her except our hidden cameras. What do you think she'll do? She's now conforming to the rules of the group without them even being there. Now, what happens when we introduced another outsider?
So just to recap, she didn't know why. Everyone else was an actor, right? She was a research participant without knowing it. Everyone started standing up and she started standing up just because everyone else did it. Now, the people who come in now, they're not actors. Like her, they are patients in this clinic. Let's see what happens.
Doesn't know the rules.
Have a seat and they'll be out in just a couple minutes. Thanks so much. Everybody was doing so I was supposed to.
Think she'll teach the new guy what to do?
So the experiment goes on and on. You will see there are many people who come in, up to the end when everyone now is standing up because of this lady. See?
Here to explain what's going on in their brain.
Nobody knows why. Okay? They don't know why, but they're all standing up just because they think that there is a rule in this group that you need to stand up. Marketing strategies have used this power of the first type of belief that we call descriptive norm, the belief that if everyone does it, I have to do it too. This is why McDonald's says, oh, we served 8 billion hamburger. This is why you see how many people have shared something on Facebook, on Twitter. This is why you see reviews on Amazon. This is why you tend to go, if everyone is swimming in a certain side of the beach, you will go there than in the opposite side. Maybe you think, well, maybe there is a shark or something. Now, the second type of belief, I mentioned the first type is what you yourself believe other people do. The second type is called injunctive norms. And that's your belief of what other people approve and disapprove. Okay. So these are books. One day I was walking in the street and this is a book. These are books that I found in the library. You see, How to Raise a Gentleman, as a gentleman would say, as a gentleman gets dressed up, a gentleman abroad, and on the other side, How to Be a Lady at the Table, How to Raise a Lady. So these are books to teach men from the 1800s, to teach men and women how to behave. This was in the UK. And there's a funny video, I'm not going to show it to you, but if you want, you will have the slides. You can go and check this video. So the injunctive norm is your belief about the extent to which other people approve of something. And you think to be approved, you need to play by the rules. So if you're at the table, you come sitting at this table thinking, oh, this is how a gentleman sits at the table. This is how a lady sits at the table, right? Of course, it's not just good manners, but everything that would get me approved. So this man is not really behaving like a gentleman, but hey, look at his friends. Of course, his friends are expecting him to do this, are approving of him to do it, which is why he's drinking beer from this barrel. Okay, and then, so just to recap, we have one, the social norms is called descriptive norm, what I believe other people do. The social norm called injunctive norm, what I believe other people approve of. And then sanctions contribute to keeping these norms in place. And sanctions can be positive or negative. And it's a belief that is what you believe will happen if you comply or don't comply specifically with the injunctive norm. So if I know everyone is wearing a blue cap, what will happen if I put a red cap? I will be disapproved, and then what? Maybe I will be ostracized. I will be made fun of. People will not share food with me. People will keep me isolated from the group. So if we need to have a working definition of social norms, we could say these are mostly unwritten rules of a group that members follow because, one, what they think others do, that's called descriptive norm. Two, what they think others approve and disapprove of, that's called injunctive norm. And because they anticipate positive and negative sanctions, for the people who comply with the norm, they get positive sanctions. And for people who don't comply with the norm, they get negative sanctions. And the negative sanctions or positive sanction can come up to even death on the negative side, right? You'll be killed, or you won't get married. Now, this is a very important distinction. A social norm is not a personal attitude. So this is a story from my family. This is my little niece on the left side of the screen. She was getting ready to come to a wedding. So my brother says, okay, Laura, her name is Laura, come downstairs and get dressed. Come downstairs, we need to go. And she comes downstairs dressed like that, like almost a demon. And so my brother says, this is not the way you can go to the wedding. we will be disapproved. You see, that's his belief that the family will be disapproved. And he thinks about the sanction. He says, what will my father say? What will your grandfather say about this whole story? Oh, and then they will say, you disrespect our family, you dishonor our family, you're not a good member of the family. So my brother sent back upstairs Laura, the little girl, and said, get dressed properly. And you see, she's sad here, while she's instead much happier here. So her attitude, Laura, the little girl's personal attitude was to get dressed like this. That's what she wanted. But the norm is get dressed like that, as you see in the other side of on the right-hand side of the screen. So very often, the personal attitude, the internal preference to do something might be not practice female genital cutting, for instance, or you putting the bottle on top of the roof, in the case, but the social norm, but I anticipate disapproval for putting the bottle on top of the roof. So I don't do what I want to do, but I do what is expected of me. So we have plenty of evidence that social norms affect child marriage, female genital cutting, family planning, use of contraceptive, women's economic empowerment, child vaccination, intimate partner violence, hand washing, maternal health. These are early child development, and even use of recreational drugs, smoking, drinking alcohol, exercise, food practices. There is a huge amount of evidence around the influence of social norms. We will see later they're not the only cause of these practices, but they do contribute, and we have plenty of evidence to show it. Here's some examples of harmful social norms we found in our data. The first one is, I wouldn't like to smoke, but I have to do it to fit in. The second one is, I wouldn't like to drink that much. This is from the UK, but you have to do it to fit in. The third one is, well, it's from my nephew. I gave him a helmet for Christmas, and he told me, oh, but uncle, I cannot use this helmet because people will think that I'm a geek, right? So that's a sanction. And these two are from Uganda. The first one is, I'd like to defend the person that is bullied at school. That's my attitude. But I don't want to be seen with him because the norm is that I shouldn't be next to him. And the sanction is, everyone will think I'm a nerd as well, exactly like he or she. And here's another example. I'd like to report the teacher that hits the child. This is from violence at school. That's my attitude. I would like to report that teacher, but nobody does it. Here's the descriptive norm. And others will call me the policeman. And here's the sanctioning. Okay. So just to solve the mystery that we started with, why were parents practicing FGMC in Senegal? Yeah, we know they love their daughters. Some didn't want to. But even if their personal attitude was against female genital cutting, these parents thought that, one, everyone in the group got their daughters cut. Everyone would approve if they got their daughters cut. And if they didn't get their daughters cut, they would be considered bad parents and their daughters won't get married. Now, was this the only explanation? No, this was a contributing factor. And it was much stronger in certain places of the country than in other places of West Africa. But in the places where UNICEF worked, this was really the reason. And one of my colleagues, Geeta Rao Gupta, told me, well, this is exactly what we found for child marriage in India. And this was one of the rare cases in which nobody wanted child marriage anymore, but they thought everyone else expected child marriage. When we found that out, we got rid of child marriage in 2 weeks. Okay, this is really the end of the first part of the presentation. We're going to have a little bit of time for questions, a little bit of time for teamwork, group work, and then we will have a little bit more time to go into more advanced social norm stuff. So I'll stop here and I'll give a chance maybe for the next 15 minutes, 20 minutes to ask questions. And please, as usual, unmute yourself, or even if you want to make a comment, please unmute yourself or raise your hand or write it in the chat. Everything is possible.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Yes. Do social norms change over time?
Thank you. That's a great question.
And what are really the things that make social norms to change over time?
That's a very good question. Yes, absolutely. Social norms change extremely through time. Um, and there are many reasons why they change. And examples include, just think about the way maybe your grandparents lived, right? Or when I think about my own life, 15 years ago, it was very rude to be in the presence of someone and checking your phone. That was when we just had mobile phones. We didn't know how to use them. Today is very common and much more acceptable to check your phone in presence of others. Or as an opposite example, in Italy, where I'm from, 30 years ago, you could smoke in restaurants. Today is considered completely unacceptable. It's not just illegal, but people will say, what are you doing? You will be highly disapproved. So yes, social norms change through time. As to the reasons why, we will have a session, not the next one, but the one after next, a training day exactly on interventions that contribute to changing social norms. But I want to say, to follow up on your very good question, that historical, global, national, and even personal events can really shift dramatically the norms of an existing group. And these events can include technological advancements, can include increase in environmental shifts. So if before, I remember, here's or just unforeseen circumstances. Here's an example. I remember, this is a very silly example from when I was a child. I was on this train and I wanted to play with another child. And I was about 5 at the time. And my mother told me, no, Ben, we're on the train. We're not supposed to do that. But then the train broke. And after an hour, I asked again, and my mother said, oh, that's a wonderful idea. So in a way, the fact that now we needed to wait for a long time relaxed and started challenging the norm that the children were not supposed to play on the train, because parents realized that they couldn't keep us just sitting quiet for 8 hours. So there are many, many reasons why social norms change, and absolutely they change through time. Sometimes they change naturally. Sometimes we can facilitate change through interventions. Thank you, Hadiza. Any other question?
Hello, good afternoon. This is Mariam. So my question is, how are you able to budget and plan for a social norm, like a social behavior change intervention in a program, knowing the fact that from what you just said, it takes time? So what advice would you give to planning when it comes to our health interventions, knowing that we know it might take forever to get this behavior changed? Thank you.
Thank you, Mariam. It's a great question. It gives me the opportunity to clarify, on the one hand, that there is no strict timeline to change social norms. Social norms can change. Look, in the train example, they change in half an hour. In the example I gave of my colleague who worked on child marriage in India, they changed in 2 weeks. In other cases, yes, they can change over a longer period of time. And part of the reason is, I guess, we would discuss this in greater detail in a couple of months when we get to the actual changing social norm strategies. But part of the reason is, how do people feel? What are their attitudes towards the norm? Is the practice visible to everyone, or is something you do in your own house? Is there the people who hold the power in the village, are they invested in protecting the norm? So there are many, many reasons that can influence how long norms will take to change. So that's the first part of my response. The second part, which is what we will see in the next training session, is that you can actually understand all that through formative research. And I cannot stress enough the importance of planning, granting if you're a funding institution, planning if you're an NGO, planning adequate time to understand qualitatively the state of a normative state of a given community. And in the next training section, we will look exactly at this, how to identify or diagnose, if you like, social norms. Thank you, Mariam. There is a question from Awal who asked, how do social norms differ from the usual deeply rooted traditional practices? So the difference between a norm and a practice is that the practice is what we actually do, while the norm is the belief that about what other people do and what other people approve of. So you can have a practice that is not upheld by a norm. Let's see if I can find an example. In Italy, we have, okay, there you go. In Italy, we have the practice of not putting chicken on top of your pizza. And I would never eat chicken or chicken with your pasta. And I would never eat chicken with your pasta, not because I anticipate disapproval from others, but just because I've never done it. I've never seen anyone in Italy doing it. I've never learned this. And my taste is now influenced by the way I grew up. So I don't have a belief of what, I do have a belief, but that belief is not influenced by the reason why I do it. So the reason why I have this practice, which is traditional in Italy, has been going on for years and years and years, is because my taste was formed through that practice. I saw someone, okay, a question from Sangeeta. Which is easier to break, descriptive belief or injunctive belief, and why and how? Well, again, it really depends. We will see this in the next slides. I guess it really depends on the type of beliefs. There is a, we will talk about these when we talk about interventions, but first of all, we need to understand whether these beliefs are correct or incorrect. So Sangeeta says, sorry, I thought she sent it to me privately. So she says, is a descriptive norm or an injunctive norm easier to break? So people can have a correct perception of what others around them do and what others around them approve of, or they can have a wrong perception. So say, for instance, that, let me give you an example from India, actually. This might be interesting for you. I was interviewing together with my colleagues, we were interviewing perpetrators of intimate partner violence. And this was a kind of a focus group, informal discussion. And we told them, you know, it's 60, it was, I don't remember the statistics, but let's say we told them, we did this survey and 60% of men beat their lovers. And they said, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I'm sure it's 100%. I'm sure it's 100%. So in that case, they were really skeptical at first. But then we organized meetings with men who didn't need their wives. And they started over time believing that, oh yeah, there are other people around me actually not doing this. So in a way, the descriptive belief was easy to break because we had a lot of deviant examples to show to them. And the same thing for the injunctive belief. So I guess there isn't an easy answer to your question. It's more about how much exposure people have to what others really do and how much exposure people do have to what others approve of. And also remember that their beliefs might be correct. So when we will see this in the week when we talk about changing social norms, it's much more difficult to change a norm when the norm is actually correct. When the norm is wrong, and I believe everyone else approves of child marriage, but it's not true, is much faster and cheaper to change that belief. We will discuss this in a couple of weeks. I see Awalu Kawu with their hands up. Awalu, please.
Thank you so much, Ben. You almost have answered my question at the end, because I was going to ask a question in relation to COVID and the social norms that emerged with COVID scenario. And I thought I should ask a question to that, but then you have already answered it in the last statement where when the evidence is correct, it's difficult to change social norms. I've been in Carlo during the COVID. We tried to make people practice the social distancing. But then you see it in Islam, the prayer is justified by not distancing. It's by putting your feet together, your shoulder together, and then even shaking hands, which we all know are some of the things. And it became quite difficult, even though some Muslim countries adopted it, but it wasn't that smooth. In some places, let me be specific to Kanu, where actually the Islamic injunction was strongly withheld in terms of not really making the distancing. So, but then towards the end, you have answered the question by saying that where the answers are correct, it's often difficult to
I think let us stick to written.
Thank you. Thank you, Waro. That's a very good example. It's a, sorry, I was drinking a glass of water. It's a good example because it really helps us think about different things. Number one, that social norms also intersect with religious norms, with legal norms, and also with material conditions. But then what you said about COVID is very important. Now, sometimes I might believe that, you know, I was talking to my infectious disease experts about COVID, and I told that they were like, we need to keep people inside for 6 months. My colleagues from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. And I told them, what you're saying is very risky. Because after 3 months, if people start going outside, breaking the lockdown, after 2 weeks, people will start seeing everyone going out, and the norm that nobody is respecting lockdown will start shaping up. And that's it. Then you lost the population. You only need 20% of people going outside the first week. Then the second week, you will have 80% of people going outside. Because those 20% will generate the feeling that everyone is going outside. So yes, we will see. I think that's a very good point. We will see how to change norms when the norm is actually correct and well perceived. Okay, any other questions or comments? And Awal, Sangeeta, I hope I answered your questions, but feel free to tell me if I haven't.
Yeah, thank you so much. You did for me.
Great. Okay. I'll just wait a few seconds to make sure before I move on to the group work. Yes, please, Elliot. You might be on mute. Let me unmute you. Yes, Elliot, I see you have your hand raised. So if you can unmute yourself, please do ask your question. There should be on the lower hand side, left-hand side of your lower left-hand side of your screen, there should be an icon looking like a microphone. If you click on the icon, you should be able to unmute yourself. Maybe while Elliot is figuring this out, let's see if anyone, or you can type your question as well in the chat, Elliot. I'll send you a chat message. You just need to reply to that one. While Elliot figured the tech out, is there anyone who wants to, oh, Elliot, yes, you're muted. Yeah, yeah, please.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I think when it comes to social norms, let me use the village setting and the traditional setting. Because when it comes to social norms, you know, these women in the village, I want to use it as believe that, okay, we have a project, women project, and we believe that these women have to come out and participate in one of the business anniversary that we're going to do. And they believe that, okay, they are supposed to be in the
I think we kind of lost you. Would it be possible for you to type your message in the chat? That way I could, oh, I think we lost you completely. Okay. Well, while they try to connect back, is there anyone else who wants to has a comment or a question? Otherwise, we can move forward. Okay. Okay, what we would like to do now in the next 15 minutes is for you to break into groups and just identify maybe 1, 2, 3 harmful norms that come to mind to you and that are relevant in your work. Don't worry too much about the phrasing. Don't worry. There is no right or wrong answers. You will be in a group of 4 to 5 people. So maybe Meredith, if we have about 70 participants, if we could create about 13, 14 groups. And please, this will not be moderated by us. So please just spontaneously discuss any comment to the presentation, any clarification you can do to each other. You can come back with questions if you have any. But what we'd like for you to do is to just start brainstorming about norms that you think are important in the work that you're doing, maybe targeting a given practice, traditional practice, or a given behavior. Okay. So just once again, the task is just have a friendly chat for the next 15 minutes, come up with norms for each of you who you think are relevant in your work. Okay, unless there are any clarifying questions, we will now split you into groups. Hello to the people who've joined right now. We are now doing group work. Hopefully you will be sent to a breakout room where your colleagues will be able to explain to you what we're doing.
As they are relevant to our work.
Okay, so I'm Michael from the World Bank, and I've also got some colleagues. Yeah. So if you want to quickly do some, introduction.
I'm Mariam from Aliko Dangote Foundation, Health and Nutrition Program Officer.
I'm happy to go next. My name is Victor Egaro. I'm from the Challenge Initiative implemented by Johns Hopkins Center for Communication.
Yeah. So I think, I'm not sure if Regina is on the call, and I see Meredith has joined us. Hi, Meredith.
Hi there.
What was the question we're trying to answer or discuss?
We just wanted to hear from everyone some harmful social norms that they think may be impacting their work.
So maybe I will step back for others to contribute. I'm actually part of the team that's putting this together. So I'd be definitely interested in hearing what others are doing. And also I don't work directly in the field because I'm actually on the comms team at the foundation. So I would take a step back and perhaps have others that are more involved in direct engagements to speak. Adenike, over to you. I think we would nominate you as our moderator in this one.
Oh, okay.
If you don't mind.
All right, fine. Okay, I guess the assignment is simple. So we should just share what harmful norms are relevant in our work. And I'll just take notes. So can we start with Jack Sumptuous? Dr. Jago, I think, yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone.
Afternoon.
Yeah, I think to my own observation, most especially during this COVID-19 pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Inheritance, issues, women not being allowed to inherit land or property. Anything else from anyone? Any other harmful social norms that are affecting our work?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Please go ahead.
The norms that have to do with the belief that the education of women ends in the kitchen. This denies women of absolute opportunities that are open to men in the society. This is a negative norm that.
One have examples of work based on what you work on that we could discuss. Hello?
Hello?
Okay, I see
Well,
Meredith
yeah.
has joined. Hi, Meredith.
Hi, I was just popping into the different groups to see how it was going, but I think somebody else was about to share.
No, the issue is for us, we don't implement either, but since our partners do, maybe what actually come to mind is because MCH is to do with, we are supporting to do with MCH related things. I think we can be able to come up with some of the things that actually happen, mostly in northern Nigeria. I think myself, Aliyu, and Victoria can suggest some of the things actually. Maybe most of these harmful traditional practices, for example, that affect maybe mothers or their children. Hello? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes. Do you have some practices in mind that you're thinking of?
So actually, yeah, the one that keeps coming to me, although not too common now, is issues of this delivery at home or being attended by a traditional birth attendant or the most senior old woman within the family, some of this, or that issue of effect of, what do you call them? mother-in-laws, sometimes if their consent have to be sought sometimes before the pregnant mother goes to hospital, causing delays and then causing some complications to both the mother and the child. These are some of the things that keeps coming to crossing my mind actually.
Great, thanks for sharing. That makes sense. Modupe, you can go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, okay. A practice that I can share is about early child marriage that happens a lot in northern Nigeria. And most of the time, the factors that drive the continuous practice is that the grandmothers of the children and the mothers of the children are the ones who are forceful about the child marriage. So because the grandmother says, that's the way I got married, that's the age I got married, and the mother also got.
Hey, Meredith, are you checking in on us?
I am.
Yeah, we've been discussing norms and talking about gender norms as sort of the most important ones. And now we're just talking a little bit more about, we were hearing from Dorothy from Chaya about how they address norms. And we're just starting to talk a little bit more about, other norms and programs that address them.
Okay, great. I'll probably just jump into another room just to make sure everyone's doing okay. So please carry on.
Thanks, Meredith.
I agree with you. I think it's descriptive from what you said, because not necessarily what they experience, it's what they see people do, right? And
Yes.
if you recall the example he gave about, or the video that showed
of cultural practice, super interesting. And obviously has some implications on the health side for sure. Hi, Meredith, how are you?
Hi, I'm just checking in, but it sounds like you all have some good discussion going, so I'll leave you to it. I'm just gonna pop through the rooms to make sure everyone's doing okay, so please continue.
Great, and we have about less than a minute left, is that right?
We have about 3.5 minutes left.
3.5 minutes, okay, great, okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Adam, could you say more about the application of toothpaste? I'm super interested in that example.
Hi everyone, I'm just joining to check in.
Hi Meredith.
Hi, have you had a chance to discuss any norms in your group?
Yeah, we each introduced ourselves and listed or gave an example of some norms in our practices. So we had some really interesting ones.
Great. Well, we just have about 2.5 minutes left. I'm just going to pop through the other groups to make sure that they're doing okay. So please carry on.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
It's in terms of quality or quantity. So it's also something that is practiced. And that's why you have malnutrition, you have anemia in pregnancy, and so on and so forth. I don't know whether the belief, okay, this is one belief, the issue of cesarean section. Yes, you know that it's not written anywhere, but a woman that has not delivered herself, it's like a failure. If you're not able to deliver yourself, it's a failure. So people don't like cesarean section, not because
works to change some of those norms, which is kind of like interesting because it also like there's that, what I found interesting was there's like a overlap sometimes between like social and religious norms, and sometimes something that's actually a social norm.
Yeah, I think you also spoke about
might be covered as like a religious norm. Like someone might be like, oh,
hepatitis B0. And for Kano, it's consistently low. But when we look at it, we find out that one of the factors contributing to that thing is in the rural community, when a woman gets birth, she's a
very big challenge in getting people to actually do social distancing. So we provided the knowledge. I was in an interview radio discussion program. The discussion was so deep, then we said, okay, what exactly are we avoiding? We're avoiding being infected. So if the distancing and hand washing and sanitizer are the one to do, why will people not carry sanitizers in their pocket? Every 30 seconds, rub the sanitizer. When they shake hand, they rub sanitizer instead of telling them not to shake hand completely. And then also when they enter the mosque, they can put the face mask, they can put the sanitizer, they can wash and do their group prayer. We received hundreds of questions and people felt comfortable not to disrupt extremely, let me use the word extreme disruption of the earlier norms that we wanted them to do to a subtle transition. They found it convenient to put the sanitizer in their pocket, to have a mask in their pocket. When they're entering the mosque, they will still wear the mask and then they will do. So these are some of the things and the time is out. Thank you so much for your contribution too.
That's a great example.
Hi, Ben. We're just coming back from the sessions.
Perfect.
Okay, I think everyone should be back now.
Okay. I see 56 people. I know there were a little bit more before, so just checking if there is any group active. Still, Meredith, I don't know. No? Okay. So why don't we get some feedback from the group discussion? Who has had a very nice discussion that they'd like to share? I wonder if anyone found norms that they really like that they'd like to share, or I don't know, anything. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Can I come in?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. This is Martin. There was one very interesting, or two interesting cases that we found. One is a state where they give hepatitis B0. Is usually given, one of our group members talked about it, you know, is usually given in the first 2 weeks of life. But in the usual practice, or some of the practices, I think is religious in the North, is that they are supposed to, the woman is not supposed to come out for like 40 days. And so sometimes the child is not able to be brought out, the mother can't come out. So they miss this first dose. The others they can give, but they miss out this particular one. So that's one. The other one is related to the assumption that the reason why people don't give why they give their children in marriage, as early marriage, is because they don't want them to be exposed to sex or, at early age outside of marriage. But, in some cultures or community, they found out that poverty was an underlying, an unspoken reason why it happens, because they find it's easier. I mean, it's a way of getting money. The person will, the person who is marrying their very young daughter provides money to the family that they can use for to take care of family needs at that particular time. So it's an unspoken reason, but it's right there. Of course, the other group, so I don't monopolize, talked also about the fact that they don't want their children to go to school because they believe they teach, sexuality and things that are not acceptable to them, to their beliefs. Over.
Thank you very much, Martin. Thank you. That seems like a great conversation you guys had. Yeah, Sangeeta, please go ahead.
So in my group, we had an interesting experience around cesarean sections, where my colleague Hadiza talked about in Nigeria, a woman is considered less if she is not able to push out the baby herself. And so she must do as what her mother did and her grandmother did and deliver the baby naturally. Whereas in India, of late, mothers prefer to have the stars aligned, deliver and show status symbols by this amazing over 65% of cesarean sections where they are not required. So the same belief but flipped across two different cultures. Another interesting thing that we discovered was in Nigeria, where children need as much protein, good quality protein, cheap protein in their diets, eggs are not given to children because of a belief that children who have eggs will grow up to be thieves. Whereas I don't think there's enough evidence for that. Over.
Thank you, Sangeeta. And this also gives us an opportunity really to show how social norms can intersect with beliefs about the world. So social norms are specifically beliefs about others. But of course, if I can have a belief that my mother would disapprove if I give eggs to my children. And even if I am convinced that eggs are totally okay with my children, I might not give them eggs because I'm worried that my mothers will disapprove of me. Thank you. Great example. Adenike, yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Ben. So for my group, we talked about use of herbal medication to treat everything, including COVID-19, with something that, one of our group members, has noticed that it's a social norm for us to always use herbal medication for everything, even if orthodox medicine is available. And then secondly, we talked about belief in religious leaders. And their influence is so all-encompassing that even if, there's credible reason why a particular intervention should be accepted, if religious leaders don't sign off on it, communities find it very difficult to accept those interventions. So I think those are the two major things we talked about. And of course, one final nutrition related, refusals for mothers to give the first breast milk, which is called colostrum, to children because they believe it's poisoned or it's bad or it's harmful. And so we miss out on a lot of babies getting that first boost of immunity when they're born. Just to summarize, those were the three main things we talked about in my group. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let's take these other couple of examples. I don't know if Victor and Emma, I don't know who raised your hand first. I think it was Victor.
Okay, so in our group, we had some rich conversations, and just a few to highlight, is also closely related to breast feeding practices. So we shared that there was this practice of giving what you call Zum water, or in the north it's called holy water, that is usually gotten from the Holy Land to children, especially during the period when they are supposed to be exclusively breastfed. So it's based on the assumption that because it's holy water and it has some spiritual benefits, regardless of whether it goes contrary to the provisions of exclusive breastfeeding, that it has some value to the children. And that's actually been practiced for a very long time. Another practice closely related to that is the inclusion of dates. I don't know what I think, yeah, it's called dates. You know, because of nutritional properties that it has, usually given to children in form of preparations and all of that, and it's for the same reason as the Zum water that is given, that has some nutritional value. There were other things we also looked at. We looked at traditional gender roles that we have come to grow with and live with, that men and women are supposed to have some traditional roles. The men are supposed to play certain roles of providing, the women are supposed to play the roles of sitting at home and taking care of children. And over the years and generation after generation, that has become sort of the norm and practice until somebody decides to interrogate. And even when people interrogate it, they are often seen as outliers or rebels. So that's also something that came out. And this is also closely related to the issue around intimate partner violence and the economic deprivation of women. And of course, issues of patriarchy that is very common, especially in Africa. We also spoke about the issue of promiscuity and its association with family planning, and that there's usually in some parts of the country, in Nigeria, there is a misconception that women that seek family planning are women that are either promiscuous or trying to be promiscuous. And so that creates a sense of stigma, you know, to the women that would desire to have family planning. So these are just a few insights from the group, even though we had quite a lot of rich conversations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Victor. Emma, do you also want to contribute?
Yes, thanks. Hi, everyone. So reporting for group 6, we also had very interesting conversations and 2 standout comments. The first, which also ties into what Dr. Martin has spoken about, which is the misconception about introduction of certain sexuality terminologies and concepts to youths, particularly in the school, because of fear of exposure and increased rate of promiscuity, being that if the youths are taught these things in the school, there's a tendency for them to want to explore. And then, of course, they'll be seen as rotten eggs and bad children in the eyes of the society. The second one we spoke about had to do with women economic empowerment, and the misconception about women that are empowered have increase in their income earnings as seen to be women that are not necessarily submissive and not listening to what the husbands, you know, just not submissive to their husbands, and they are often ostracized and sometimes even sent out, you know, face divorce and rejection by their families, and they live isolated life. So yeah, those are the things we had from our groups.
Thank you very much, Emma. Okay, I guess this was the last of the people who I can see commenting. So it looks like you had very good group conversations. In the remaining 15 minutes before we finish off this session and with time for final comments and questions, I'd like to, let me just check, sorry, I should probably check the chat just to check that. Oh, there you go. So we have one comment from someone whose username is Niger SPCUNFWP, who mentioned the consent of husband allowing the women to visit medical centers. It's really affecting the women because tradition here allowed the woman to go out only with the consent of the husband, contrary to that approval. Women have no right to go out of their own will. And then someone who is ABIA, NFWP, social norms for women inheritance is restricted to their husbands and male sons, making them reluctant to accepting the project. Some fear that their husbands are responsible and could be unable to handle the project in the future. Then Taraba SPCU said, women in Puda, Kule cases where women are not allowed to go out without the permission or consent of the husband. John Dada mentioned accessing basic health services for women and children under often limited by the norm, where women are expected to seek approval before they go for any outing. And finally, ABIA and FWP also added, there are also situations where some of the women are married and do not believe that they will have a place in the project should they marry out into other communities. Great. Okay, these are very good examples. Just let's keep focus on what we said about the basic feature of social norm as being beliefs about other people's behavior, actions, and approval. So the last example from ABIA or from this ABIA person is also great. So some of these women are married and they anticipate this approval for marrying outside of the community. And John also said, women are expected to seek approval before they go for any outing. So women believe that if they leave the household without approval of the husband, they will meet this approval. Yes, Awalu, I saw you raise your hand. So please, before we move into the advanced key points, please.
Yes, quickly, I just want to say that even though we didn't highlight on our group, because most groups almost said some of the things we discussed, but I think what we came out very distinctively clear is that we need to understand at what point the social norm conflicts with other norms or challenges other norms. And we think that's the point in which some of the discussion, maybe in the subsequent sessions, we would like to see we address. Otherwise, we see that some of the examples that I had from other groups, I see they are talking about the conflict between social norm and other norms. For example, the prophet, following what the prophet did in terms of dates, was not because of the nutritional benefits of dates, but because of the spiritual. That's why people will not drop that. So you see there is a conflict there instead of actually other things. So we'll appreciate to see that subsequent sessions will also clarify at what point do we really recognize the distinction between, at what point we recognize the conflict of the norms or the challenges of the norms by the social norm. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Awalu. Okay, so what are these advanced key points I'd like to make today? So the first one is that certain norms apply to specific groups, while certain norms are out there in the society. So you see two images in this slide. On the left-hand side, you see an adolescent wondering whether they should smoke or not. She's thinking, oh, maybe if I smoke, I will be approved by these other three friends of mine. So the norm that you will be approved if you smoke is really active in this small group of adolescents. And then on the other side, you see a woman, very small in the center of the picture, walking through the market. She doesn't know all the people around her, but she knows that she can probably just, for instance, start walking on other people's merchandise. Not because she wants to be approved by those specific people, but because that's a norm that is out there in the society. And here's a picture that I took from a BBC documentary in the past about a video game called Pokemon Go. But essentially what this child was saying was, you know, if you don't have, if you cannot capture one of these little animals, the goal of the video game was to capture an animal. If you don't have one, you're not part of the gang. So your friends will disapprove. So here's a norm that to be approved, you needed to play the video game. So that's really the first advanced key point. The second advanced key point is that a practice can be sustained by direct and indirect norms. So, or better, that the relation between the practice and the norm can be direct or indirect. So when it's direct, like in the case of female genital cutting, parents are cutting their daughters because when there is a norm affecting that, because they anticipate approval for doing so. So you see, it's almost difficult to distinguish the norm and the practice being what they actually do, and the norm being what they anticipate. But some other times the norm can act indirectly. So this is from our work in India. These men who hit their wives, there was no norm that if I hit my wife, I would be approved by my peers. But there were norms that allowed this behavior to happen. Norms that, for instance, the first one is that if you go outside and you talk about violence happening in the family, it's the entire family that loses honor. So even if a woman tells that to her father, they will keep it quiet. Or another norm is norm of family privacy. So that's the norm that you're not supposed to intervene in affairs between a husband and a wife. Maybe even if there is even if a neighbor hears violence happening, they don't intervene because of this norm. And then the last example is norm of tolerance of violence, the norm that as a woman, you're supposed to tolerate violence to keep the family together. So you see, even though maybe sometimes you don't, and we will discuss this in the diagnostic in the next training session, even though there might be no norm that is exactly the mirror of your practice, there might be norm that contribute to keeping that practice together. Which means also sustained by multiple norms. Here's a practice X that might be sustained both by a norm X, so direct, but also by a norm 1, 2, 3, 4, and these norms also contribute to other practices. So really doing that diagnostic work that we will discuss in the next training section becomes really important. The third advanced point is that norms are never alone. They always interact with other factors, including factors such as laws, policies, governance structures. Some of you mentioned the norm that women cannot complain if they don't inherit land, but there might also be a law for that, economic policies. And then you have material factors, availability of services. Where is the closest hospital? Where is the closest police? How expensive is a taxi to go to the hospital or to go to vote at the voting station? Then you have social factors. Is this a polygamous society? Is this a monogamous society? Is this a society where people tend to live all close to each other? Is this a society where people tend to live far from each other? All these things can really change how a given action, a given practice is sustained. And then eventually you have individual factors. Factor of belief, your education, your aspirations, your skills, your personal attitudes, as we mentioned before, and even your self-efficacy, your belief that you can do it, all included in the global trends, such as migration, technological innovation. So norms really act very powerfully when these factors intersect. So here's an example of how individual and institutional factors intersect. So you might have a law against intimate partner violence, and you might have a woman who wants to has a knowledge of that law and visits the police station. But if the police officer is worried that despite the law and despite even their own interest in prosecuting the perpetrator, if they're worried that the family will come back and burn the station because there is a norm that you're not supposed to report domestic violence, then despite the law, the police officer will not do anything. And then the fourth point, which I think is my last one, the fourth point is about gender norms specifically. Gender norms are a subset of social norms, and they are those norms that specifically contribute to define, contribute to even the identity of a man and a woman, and specifically define what it means to be a man or a woman in a given society. The example on the right is a picture from Nigeria, actually. I mean, the picture is not from Nigeria, but the story is from Nigeria. Was one of our colleagues from Gates who told me this story. And he told me, you know, we were I think it was Nigeria. Now, it might have been India, but I'm pretty sure it was Nigeria. This has been a few years ago now. But the story doesn't change. So they were doing a campaign on lead poisoning. You know, if you drink from pipes made of lead, you really develop very bad sickness and you will end up dying in a horrible way. So they were painting the poisonous pipes red, and the pipes that were safe to drink, they were painting them in green. So then this colleague of ours goes to a village chief to talk about the intervention, to evaluate the intervention. And the village chief is very knowledgeable. My colleague is very happy because he sees that the village chief knows everything about the illness. He knows what lead poisoning is, he knows the stages, he knows that red pipes are unsafe and green pipes are safe. So he's about to leave, and then he says, oh, sorry, just one last question. So where do you drink from? And sure enough, the village chief points to the red pipe. So then my friend is puzzled and says, but why do you drink from the red pipe? It's going to kill you and your entire family. And this village chief says, yes, that's true, but the green pipe is in my neighbor's compound. And women are those responsible for gathering water. So there was a gender norm that women are expected to gather water for the entire family. And then he said, I cannot send my wife or my daughter alone in the neighbor's house. What will people say about her, about me, and about my entire family? So he was more scared of being disapproved and ashamed and dishonored for contravening the norm that women don't go to another neighbor's house alone. He preferred to save his honor than to save his physical health and the health of all his children and his wife. So that's one story. And then you remember this man? We saw this man, the man in the left-hand side of the picture, of the slide. We saw this man in one of the first slides, and I promise you, I will tell you his story. This is a very interesting story, and it's a story in the drill platform. So, you know, there are all these big platforms in the middle of the ocean that drill petrol outside of the ocean. So here's the story. One day, one researcher who studied gender norms, well, she didn't study gender norms, she studied empathic communication, an excellent figure. So she goes to this drill platform because people say, we don't know why, but a lot of people are dying on our platform. And she says, okay, tell me one story. How did they die? And they say, well, here's one story. There was one man who was extracting oil and something went wrong with a cable and the cable snapped off. And then we had to bury him in the sea. We only had 15 minutes for the funeral, but you know, nobody talks about it. So what she finds out is that because of gender norms that men are not supposed to be afraid, men are not supposed to ask for help, when things were going wrong, nobody will say, oh, I don't think this is safe. I don't think, because these were all men with this idea of gender norms related to being men. So even though they were scared, they pretended they were not scared. But if you are scared after 10 years working on an oil platform, maybe something is going wrong. And maybe your fear is a signal that something is going bad. So to solve this issue, you know what this person did? She got men to talk about their, and the man in the picture lost his left hand exactly in this way, because he didn't know how to do something, but he was told that he was weak if he didn't know how to do, if he asked for help. So he didn't ask for help and he lost his left hand. So then she took these men and she started making them talk about their feelings, their emotions, their children, the people they missed. And they didn't understand why at first, but then as they opened up and changed gender norms about what was expected of men, they also started asking each other's help on the platform. They started saying, oh, I don't feel safe. They started saying, you know, I don't know how to do this. And sure enough, this was now a few years ago. This was in the end of the 90s. But there was one of Shell's platforms where the people died the most, became one of the most excellent Shell platform, where with the least people getting injured. So we talked about many things. What are the key takeaways today? I guess the first thing that I'd like for you to remember and take home is that social norms are beliefs of two types: descriptive, what I believe other people in my group do, and injunctive, what I believe other people in my group approve of. The second is that different social norms apply across different groups. For an example from tipping is that if I go to the United States, I will be disapproved if I don't tip. This actually happened to me. First time I went to the United States, I didn't tip. The entire restaurant started shouting at me. It was it was horrible. But if you go to Japan, and I didn't go to Japan, but I was told, because now I'm very worried about tipping, if I go to Japan and I tip, apparently people would get very angry. So the norm is the opposite. And I can navigate both, which means that a woman or a man in Nigeria might know and comply with certain norms at work, other norms at home, other norms with their friends, other norms in the city, other norms in the rural area. The third takeaway is that different social norms can together sustain a practice. So remember direct and indirect. So it's not necessarily that one practice is sustained by one social norms. We need to diagnose the universe of norms. And next month, we will see explicitly how to do this. And the fourth takeaway point is that social norms can be the main driver of a given practice or not. They can intersect with other factors that are non-normative. Access to resources, institutional rules and regulations, availability of education, availability of models. And these are just some examples. So our goal is to understand how social norms intersect with other factors. And the final and fifth point is that some norms contribute to defining men's and women's place in a group, structuring hierarchical relations. And these are specifically called gender norms. And they can be protective. Think, for instance, of a norm that says real men never hurt women, or real husbands take care of their wives when they are scared or insecure, and real wives take care of their husbands when they are scared or insecure, right? So norm can also be pro-social, but other norms can be harmful. Other gender norms can be harmful. So really, these are the 5 takeaways that we have for today. Before we move to, we have a task that we'd like to ask you to complete before the next seminar, before the next training session. But I'd like, first of all, to stop for a minute. We have a few minutes, and see if there is any final thoughts, either on these key advanced points that I said, or on what I said at the very beginning. Anything is fine. So I'll now shut up for a few seconds, see if there is anyone who wants to add anything, raise their hand, chat in the chat box or anything. And I also see, there is 2 messages that I hadn't, one message that I haven't read before from Nafisa from Kebbi State, who in the group they discussed Purda, empowered decision making, as some harmful norms can affect the success of Nigeria for Women Project in Kebbi State. And in their group, they believe that we continue as a result to render advocacies on the importance of financial independence and social inclusion. That financial independence and social inclusion will be key in implementing the project. Thank you very much, Nafisa. Okay, is there any thought on maybe the advanced key points that I mentioned or what I said before? Yes, Paul, please. Thank you.
Hi, Ben. Thank you very much. I like especially the point that shows that social norms intersect with other factors to influence behaviors, influence practice. Because I think that is a very, very important point, especially during research and programming for social norm change. to take into account other factors that intertwine with social norms to influence behavior and practice change. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. That's a very good comment. Thank you. Anyone else? Asbiala, Asbi, I see you're muted. Do you want to contribute? Maybe?
No, I think you've done a great job by basically giving us a very in-depth analysis of what the thoughts are in terms of social norms. And I think I and everyone will look forward to the next webinar series. Meanwhile, we'll just wait for a few seconds if anyone has questions, clarifications, or additions before we close out for the day.
Ben, this is Sangeeta here. Can I come in with a question?
Absolutely.
Yes, please, Sangeeta.
So Ben, what you've explained today shows that social norm is not simple. There are so many contributing factors. There are so many intersections that happen with social factors, individual factors, governance, institutions, gender norms has also been thrown in, positive norms, negative norms, direct behavior, indirect behavior, that's a lot. But if you have to program and if you have to start somewhere, do we need to have this entire story disassembled and understood in entirety before we progress, before we take step one? Or can we begin at some point and then keep unraveling the story and keep improvising? Over.
I think learning from the I agree with you that learning from the field can happen as we unfold our project. But that requires an extended period of time to engage with the communities in your project. So I think the more information you can gather before you start designing, especially in today's structure in international development, when you have funding for 1 or 2 years, then you need to move into another place. I worked for the NGO Tostan in Senegal, and they stayed in Senegal for 30 years, at times for 10 years in the same communities, 20 years in the same communities. So that's a great way of learning and improving and learning and improving. I guess what the risk of targeting the wrong norm is that you can't just, you have to imagine, I see the social fabric as a tower made of bricks. And you might be right that you take out one brick and nothing happens, or that brick might be fundamental, and as you work on it, the entire tower might collapse. So really trying to understand why people are doing what they're doing before we start getting incentives, pushing incentives in the system to change it, will really help us with the sustainability and effectiveness, but also safety of our program. The risk of creating unintended harm is extremely elevated with top-down interventions. And I witness in the world with the NGOs I work, that I know, very few NGOs take responsibility and are actually interested in understanding when they created harm. So yeah, I guess the social world is complex, and maybe we will get together to try and understand how to get a glimpse of that in the next session. And in the session after, how can we work with community members themselves to lead part of our intervention, because they have been doing that diagnostic work maybe for 50 years, while we only have a few months. So really, I think it's a good, I would say what you say is right, provided that we do our best to collect all the information we can before we implement the project. Thank you for the thoughtful comment.
Thank you very much for that elaborate explanation, Ben. If we don't have any other contributions, I think in preparation of the next webinar, Ben, do you want to show the next slide?
Thank you, Asbi. So what we'd like for you to do in preparation for the next webinar is to select one practice that you're working on, right? This could be, I don't know, vaccination. This could be women's participation to paid employment. This could be whatever you like. And we'd like for you to identify, to think about up to 3 norms that you think might protect from people from that practice, or might sustain the practice, the harmful practice. And here's a model of how you could write your norm. So we'd like for you to, as you brainstorm, to write the practice down, in this case is child marriage, to write the norm down, which I put the number because it might be the first, the second, the third. They might all relate to the same practice. You might change practice. Better if they're all related to the same. And in this case, the norm is respectable women marry early. And then we'd like for you to think of the function. Is this a norm that contributes to the practice? In this case, norm that contributes to the child marriage practice. Or this is a norm that might protect people from the practice. And then we'd like for you to think, okay, who is the subject to this norm? Like, who is being requested to comply with this norm? And in this case is adolescent girl who reached puberty. And then you could think, are there negative or positive sanction? And we put, yeah, here there is a negative sanction, that there are less desirable marriage prospects at age 15. And then we'd like for you to think, who is the reference group? What is the group that applies to the norm? And in this case, we put community members. So these girls are anticipating community members' approval. And in specific, featuring in-laws and husbands. And where is it active? And in this case, when we did this, was communities in the north of the country. So this is a model that we'd like for you to try and use. If it's too complex, use a simplified version. Don't use it at all. It's a suggestion because we do think that this is quite helpful in putting down the norm. And we'd like for you to think about 1, 2, 3 norms that you think that either protect or contribute to a given harmful practice. So this is really the end on my end. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Hasbia.
Thank you very much, Ben, and thank you everyone for being part of the first webinar series for the Learning Collaborative. I'll be sharing the next session brief, and that will be October 21st, same time, 2 to 4 p.m. Please, if you have any questions, clarifications, or additions, you can always send me an email. Meanwhile, we will also be having in general session, a general shared learning session on the 23rd of September, where we'll be hearing from our committee of practice members on the mix or the dynamic between the social norms and their individual projects. Thank you very much from my end, and I think I'll hand over to Rebecca or Meredith if they have anything to add before we log off for today.
No, thank you, Hasbi. Thank you, Ben. That was such an interesting session. Just thank you all for participating, and we will be sharing the slides from today, so you can look at them at your leisure and think a little bit more about the concepts that were discussed today.
Thank you, everyone. I think that will be all for today. Thank you very much for all your contributions and also participating with the Learning Collaborative first webinar series.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye. Have a nice day.
Thank you,
you.
Brian, and thank you, Hasbila. Thanks. Have a nice day, everybody.
Thank you.
Executive.
Thank you.